So if you guys are wondering how the Pilot Lodge build is going up here in Big Lake, Alaska, building runways, building the cabins, just getting this whole property all up to speed, well, we've got an update for you, what we've been doing since last fall. First, let's go ahead and quick recap where we were. Well, when we first got here in August, pretty dusty, pretty dry, so we had to go ahead and address that, push around some dirt, spread around some manure to try to hold some moisture in the dirt on the runway. Learned how not to use a dump trailer, learned a lot of lessons with heavy equipment and dump trailers, definitely figured out the capacity of this one, and that's definitely not the way that you're supposed to be using it. Also got the hangar cleaned out, definitely needed a little bit of love and lots of garbage to get rid of in there. Spent a lot of hours pressure washing, scrubbing that floor, could not get it cleaned up. Finally got a diamond grinder, started grinding it down so that we could epoxy that floor and make it super pretty and bright in there to work in there all winter. We'll never, ever, ever epoxy a concrete floor again. Certainly won't be grinding one, probably won't be epoxying it either. I think that's what everyone says after they epoxy a floor. Then, of course, we got the east end of the runway that we were working on when Mike showed up. Made a lot of progress over there. You can see all those black spots where we dumped that manure around in that low area to help raise it up because I didn't know any better. And you're going to find out in this episode how terrible of an idea that really was. It looks super pretty. That's what we did after a few days of work. That's how it looked. It looked like we had this nice giant area to turn around down at the end of the runway. I was so totally not correct. We also figured out that we needed a bigger ramp because you can see all those airplanes and trailers and stuff smushed in there. I was kind of afraid of running into something with some heavy equipment. So we decided, hey, let's spend a day and make the ramp bigger. We'll also get some fuel tanks delivered here, pop them in place, super great. Pushed a lot of dirt around, took a week about, I think it was a solid week to actually get that dirt pushed around and make that ramp area, not a day. But when it was all said and done, very well worth it, just substantially longer than I ever could have expected to get that done. Could definitely use a bigger dozer. That D3 is cool, could definitely use a D6. Also got this little shed moved into place. That's going to be one of our new little cabins, or possibly the utility shack, like the laundry shack or something we might set up in that little cabin there. But that basically catches you up, so now it's time to get out there and start surveying the runway. We wanted to go ahead and figure out where centerline really was. Easiest way to do that, just a little green laser, just a little laser you could use hunting or whatever. And that served as a pretty good straight line to go out there and mark with some spray paint to figure out where the centerline really was. Of course, as soon as you start pushing dirt around, that orange paint gets covered up, but I had already run over too many stakes and whatever else, so we figured that was probably the best way to go ahead and survey it. And then, of course, I wanted to get started on the crosswind runway because I love taking on too many projects at a time, kind of like a squirrel in that sense. So there was a nut over on the side of the runway. It was a new runway, and I decided to run over there and start blazing a new trail to try at least figure out what is this new runway going to look like. It's so exciting. We have this one runway, now we can go ahead and make another one. Of course, I didn't exactly make a whole lot of progress on building a whole nother runway. When we first moved into this property, I really believed that you could build a runway with a bulldozer in like a day or two. Turns out I was so incredibly wrong. It is still very satisfying though, just to shove over trees. And although this is a small bulldozer, it's only 14,000 pounds, that is a pretty small one. It still does an okay job. So we had like this little hill here in the way of that new runway. It pushed it over pretty good. This can kind of put everything in perspective for you of like where we are at on the property, right? So we have our new ramp area over there on the left. We have this new runway that was kind of partially done for us, about 700 feet worth of it already. And it's about 80 feet wide there in the middle. And then you can also see a little bit more zoomed out view here. The actual runway that we have been using, that east-west, that's up in the top left-hand corner of the screen. So that's the east-west. This is going to be kind of the crosswind, maybe 3113, something like that. And you can see the trails that we were kind of pushing through there. Not the straightest of lines. I'll work on my bulldozing skills. And you can actually see that tiny little yellow dot there in the middle is that bulldozer pushing over that one little hill smack in the middle of the runway that we need to knock down. And we've actually got a whole lot of hills to knock down eventually to make all this work. That big hill there in the middle, estimated at about 36,000 yards of material that needs to get moved out of there to flatten that down. And then we can also use that material to help raise up that runway, ensure we have good drainage, and raise up our current existing runway. Basically 725 is what we call that east-west runway running there. You can see this trail that I pushed through the trees there. Super crooked. But working on it. Eventually we'll get out there when we don't have so many leaves on the trees and survey it with some orange spray paint and some string a little bit easier once there's not so much foliage out there. Now, besides just wasting a bunch of diesel and time trying to make another runway when the other runway wasn't even finished yet, we said, hey, we should probably put a windsock in, right? Because the winds are super swirly around here. Every good airport could use a good windsock, or 2 or 3. And we'd love to have it up at about the 10-foot level here. Let's go ahead and dig a hole in the ground and shove this pipe in. But the ground's full of gravel, and it's really hard to dig through that. We don't have an auger of any sort. So I know what we'll do. We'll just wrap a chain around this pipe and kind of pull and push it down into the ground with the loader. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, it's not like the pipe would just, I don't know, like bend in half, right? Because that's exactly what happened. So 1.5-inch steel pipe did not exactly crush through that gravel like we were hoping to shove itself down on the ground to make a nice windsock pole for us. So as I made a trip down to Anchorage, dropped Mike off at the airport, went ahead and ran by Lowe's and grabbed an auger. And we're going to use that auger to go ahead and make a real hole in a little bit softer ground and put the pipe in the right way, just kind of using that postal digger to clean up that hole, and then finally got the pipe in and had somewhat of a real windsock pipe set up. So that was kind of cool, finally got that done, and then it was time to get back to, well, the big project of actually making a usable runway. It was already usable, we were using it, but it was time to actually start cleaning up the drainage issues and some of the soft spots. First thing I did was make about 20 runs with the loader to dig in some really good gravel, or what looked like good gravel, what I thought would drain well and compact well, dump it in the middle there. And then I realized, man, it's going to take forever. What if I just bladed some good material from the edges to the middle to make a nice crown? All right, project fix the runway. Got that line marked out. Gonna cut, nice marking pass. Start throwing material this way. All this material seems decent enough, and just start pushing stuff back towards the middle, pick up all this material, move it to the middle, and then work it back out, smooth it out. And yeah, hopefully there's not too much nasty material in this area here. The other side, everything got pushed over more, so we scraped away what felt like nasty material. Even this stuff that's hard, and then this is soft because it hasn't been compacted. It might actually be good once it gets compacted. It's so hard to tell what is good and what isn't, and where you're gonna sink and where you're not. But got a mostly straight-ish ditch marked out here. Looks like it took a little curve there. But this is gonna be the start of our ditch. We're just gonna keep digging down here now, and what we take from here will move all back to the middle. All this other stuff, this windrow, will get pushed over to the side, and hopefully that'll give us some drainage. It seems like we're already almost a foot higher in the middle there, in the middle of the runway. From down here, we'll need at least that. There should be enough material here. I think this is the fastest way to do it. I'm trying to use the loader to bring in buckets and dump them in the middle, and then blade them out with the grader. Seems like it's going to take forever, but we still might have to do that right there in that kind of lowish area where things don't seem to be draining super well. So obviously every runway, every road needs a crown. It needs to be higher in the middle than on the edges. You need to have some sort of ditches for drainage. So that was the plan, just kind of keep driving back and forth, pushing material from the side, digging a ditch, a low spot, while pushing it towards the middle to make a nice high spot. Should work out perfectly, right? And I'm not sure how many yards of material the actual grader pushes with each pass. It seems like a lot, but I think it seems like a lot more than it really is. Or it just takes a lot of yards of material to build a runway. So looking back at the runway, we've made that kind of a flat spot. That's our low spot of the ditch. We're pushing everything towards the middle. It's going slowly but surely. So lots and lots of passes to side shift that material from the sides over to the middle. Good moisture content at the time. It actually seemed pretty good, and even just the weight of the grader pushing over and the weight of the blade pushing over it seemed to be pressing it down pretty nicely. Of course, Steph was kind enough to pop in right when I was getting close to almost being done, just in time. Worked out pretty good for her. I'd made just enough of kind of a flat spot in between there that she was able to land, and it was actually an improvement really over what we had when we first arrived. It definitely held more moisture, wasn't so dusty, and seemed pretty firm at the time. But as luck would have it, Rain was in the forecast, although the weather was nice there, and we pushed a lot of dirt to the middle of that runway to make a nice crown. The test would come in just a few short days, but hey, I thought I was in pretty good shape. I even put a bunch of drain pipe in the ground through that little culvert there to help the water flow where it intersects with the crosswind runway. So eventually we'll cover up those pipes so we can actually have the runway going across there and have some drainage going underneath it. And the drainage off this thing is going to be great. It's shaped like a nice crown now. What could possibly go wrong? It's time to go ahead and head in the house and do some house projects. Gotta clean up things in there, finish kind of moving in, put this little in-floor electrical outlet in because, well, we bought an electric couch that has a plug on it. So didn't know couches had plugs on them, but apparently they need electricity nowadays. Got to install an electrical outlet for that, but then got to hang out with the dogs on the couch for a little bit, relax, and just think, hey, that's such a nice sound of rain on that metal roof we have. Oh, won't it be nice to go ahead and enjoy this well-draining runway? If only that was the case. For those of you unfamiliar, yes, that's the sound of sloshing around in mud. To be continued.